You know that feeling when the alarm goes off at like 6 a.m.? The room is just completely dark, and you just stare at the ceiling for a second, trying to gather the will to actually
Yeah.
move?
Oh, absolutely. It's brutal.
Right. You drag yourself out of bed, you commute, you put in 10, maybe 12 hours, you hustle constantly because we're doing, everything society tells you to do, working yourself to the absolute bone.
Yeah, doing everything right.
Exactly. And yet, at the end of the month, you look at your bank account and think, how am I still exactly where I was last month? It feels like running a marathon on a treadmill. You're sweating, you're totally exhausted, but you're not actually moving forward financially.
No, you're just stuck. And it's this quiet devastation that millions of people experience, honestly. It cuts right to the core of how we misunderstand the actual mechanics of success.
Because we're taught that hard work is the only thing that matters.
Right. We are culturally conditioned from childhood to believe that physical exertion and the time you spend working directly translate into financial security. The assumption is just that if you're tired, you must be making progress.
Yeah, that mantra, hard work pays off. It's painted on every gym wall and corporate break room across the country.
It really is. But today, we're doing a deep dive into a source document titled Money Matters. And, well, it takes a sledgehammer to that exact mantra.
It really does.
And what makes this text so compelling isn't just the financial advice, but the format. The author frames this entire exploration of wealth psychology as a philosophical dialogue.
Yeah, between Arjuna and Krishna.
Exactly. Two legendary figures from antiquity. And by using this ancient narrative structure, the text elevates personal finance from just, a spreadsheet exercise to this timeless human struggle.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because reading through this dialogue, one of the most striking observations the text makes right out of the gate is that human nature hasn't changed at all.
Not even a little bit.
Over thousands of years, the exact same financial blind spots that keep a modern professional stuck on that treadmill today, those are the exact same behavioral traps that existed in ancient times. Like, the technology changed, but our brains didn't.
Which is wild to think about. It tells us that the root problem isn't the current economy or the specific era or the fiat currency we use. The problem is cognitive.
Right.
The text explicitly states that if hard work alone created wealth, then everyday laborer, every person doing backbreaking manual work out in the sun, would be a billionaire.
Which they clearly aren't.
Right, they aren't. Wealth, according to this framework, isn't about the physical hours you log or the sweat equity you build. It's entirely about how you think, how you adapt, and, well, fundamentally how you behave with capital once it actually enters your ecosystem.
And that leads to this massive paradigm shift. I mean, if exhausting yourself with hard work isn't the defining factor of wealth, then what actually is?
That's a great question.
The text hits us with a reality check that I think a lot of high earners really struggle with, which is that earning money and building wealth are two completely different things.
Completely different. They require entirely different cognitive skill sets. You can be an absolute genius at generating income and just a complete novice at building wealth.
Yeah, we see that all the time.
All the time. The text argues that the trap most people fall into, and this is especially true for professionals climbing the corporate ladder, is that as their income increases, their baseline expenses increase even faster.
Yes. It sets up this scenario that is so common today. The paradox of the high earner who is essentially flat broke.
Oh, yeah.
It asks you to look at two friends. One earns 30,000 rupees a month, but manages to keep their lifestyle in check, right? So they save 5,000.
Okay, that's a lot.
But the other friend earns a very respectable 80,000 rupees a month, a massive leap in income. But their lifestyle has bloated to the point where they spend 85,000. And the text definitively states the person earning 30,000 is richer. Because wealth isn't the massive salary. Wealth is the margin you keep.
That's such a crucial point.
Yeah.
And the underlying mechanism at play here is basically Parkinson's law, which states that work expands to fill the time allotted for it. Well, in finance, expenses naturally expand to consume the available income.
They really do. It just vanishes.
Exactly. When that second friend's salary jumped to 80,000, their psychological baseline for what they, needed, it just shifted. Suddenly, the nicer car, the better apartment, the premium brands, they stopped feeling like luxuries and started feeling like necessities.
Because society reinforces that. We only see visible consumption.
Right. We see the designer clothes and the restaurant check. We don't see the silent deficit compounding in the background.
I mean, it's like trying to fill a bathtub without putting the plug in.
Oh, I like that.
It doesn't matter how high you turn up the faucet or how incredible the water pressure is from that high-paying job. If the water is draining out just as fast, or even faster, you are always going to be sitting in an empty tub. The sheer volume of the water just doesn't matter if there's no retention.
And what's fascinating here is the behavioral psychology behind that open drain. The text points out a crucial difference in how we sequence our financial lives. The vast majority of people, they spend their income first.
Right. They pay the bills, buy the things.
Exactly. They pay for their lifestyle, their desires, their monthly subscriptions, and then they vaguely plan to save whatever happens to remain at the end of the month.
And because of that shifting psychological baseline we just talked about, there is never anything remaining.
Never.
The money just finds a way to be spent.
Because our brains are wired for immediate gratification. The wise, according to the text, flip that entire sequence. They say first.
Pay yourself first.
Yes. They forcefully extract the capital for their future before they even see it, and they force their current lifestyle to fit into whatever remains. It is a fundamental inversion of the default human operating system.
But, I mean, if the mathematical logic of saving first is so incredibly obvious, why is it so agonizingly difficult in practice?
Well, because we are fighting millions of years of evolutionary biology. Our brains are heavily optimized for the present moment. We suffer from something called temporal discounting.
Temporal discounting, what is that exactly?
Basically, it means we place a much higher value on a reward we can get today compared to a reward we might get 10 years from now. The future version of you feels like a stranger to your current brain.
Oh, wow. That makes so much sense. Which introduces the next major theme of the dialogue, the silent theft of short-term comfort. You know, choosing today's pleasure over tomorrow's freedom.
Right. The text highlights the mundane, everyday leaks in our financial lives. A new phone when your current one works perfectly fine. A fancy bike, expensive clothes, ordering takeout every weekend.
Things we all do.
Right. And individually, these purchases feel completely justified. You tell yourself, I worked a 12-hour day, I'm stressed, I deserve this small comfort.
And the psychological reward of the purchase is immediate. You get the dopamine hit right when you tap your card.
But the text is ruthless about the hidden math of these dopamine hits. It presents a hypothetical. Consider spending 300 rupees every single day on unneeded comforts versus taking that exact same 300 rupees and investing it.
Which doesn't sound like a lot in the moment.
It doesn't. But over a decade, that divergence doesn't just create a slight difference in a ledger. It creates two entirely different realities. The text literally refers to these small, unquestioned choices as things that steal opportunities.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic here and push back on behalf of anyone listening who feels a bit attacked right now.
Fair enough.
Isn't life meant to be actually lived? We're not robots programmed merely to accumulate capital. I mean, is a 300 rupee coffee or a nice dinner with friends really going to destroy a person's future? Calling a coffee a thief of opportunity feels just a bit draconian, doesn't it?
That reaction is incredibly common, and it's actually the primary defense mechanism our present biased brains use to protect our comforts.
Okay, ouch.
Well, the text anticipates this resistance and offers a brilliant natural analogy in response. Just as a massive river is carved out drop by drop over time, wealth is created or destroyed rupee by rupee.
Right, it's the compounding effect.
Exactly. The dialogue isn't advocating for a miserable ascetic existence where you never experience joy. It is challenging your unquestioned mechanical habits. When you consistently trade small amounts of capital for fleeting dopamine hits, you aren't just losing the initial 300 rupees.
You're losing what that money could have become.
Yes. You are obliterating the compound interest that money could have generated over 20 years. You are trading your future autonomy, your ability to walk away from a bad job or survive a crisis, for a temporary taste in your mouth today.
So the issue isn't the single cup of coffee. The issue is living on autopilot, allowing comfort to slowly bleed your capital dry day after day until you wake up a decade later and realize you have no leverage in your own life.
Bingo. The text serves as a warning that our small daily choices eventually harden into our permanent reality.
Okay, so assuming someone manages to plug the bathtub, they overcome their present bias, they stop bleeding capital on fleeting comforts, and they actually retain their money. Where does this philosophical dialogue say those resources should actually be directed? Because hoarding cash under a mattress isn't a strategy for wealth either.
No, not at all. Inflation will quietly erode that just as surely as a daily coffee habit. This brings us to a profound divergence the text highlights regarding how different mindsets view the very concept of spending. It contrasts a cost-based mindset with a value-based mindset.
This battle between consumption and education in the text is super striking.
It really is. The dialogue explicitly states that when faced with allocating resources, the poor mindset asks, how much does this cost?
Just focusing on the price tag.
Right. The fixation is entirely on the immediate loss of capital, but the wealthy mindset asks a fundamentally different question. They ask, what value will this create? They don't see spending, they see investment. They are calculating the future return.
And the text points out a painful irony that I think we see everywhere today. People will happily drop thousands on entertainment, concert tickets, multiple streaming services, a night out without a second thought.
Oh, easily.
But those exact same people will agonize, hesitate, and ultimately refuse to spend a fraction of that amount on a book, a course, or learning a new skill.
Because entertainment is frictionless. It provides that immediate unearned dopamine we talked about. Education, on the other hand, introduces cognitive friction. The payoff is delayed, and it requires actual effort. But the text emphasizes that we are living in an era where the old excuses for not learning have completely evaporated. It lists modern skills, sales, English communication, coding, leveraging AI tools, digital marketing, all of which can be mastered using the device you already own.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We are walking around with literal Ivy League universities in our pockets. The smartphone is objectively the most powerful educational tool ever conceived, offering access to almost the entirety of human knowledge.
It's unprecedented.
Yeah. Yet, as the text points out, the vast majority of society chooses endless scrolling. We use a supercomputer as a slot machine.
That is a great way to put it. And that choice to consume rather than create, to scroll rather than learn, it carries catastrophic consequences for your financial trajectory. The text shifts its focus to the future, specifically addressing the modern landscape of AI and rapid automation.
Which is terrifying for a lot of people.
It is, and it declares a harsh truth. The future will not belong to the strongest, and it won't even belong to the smartest. It will belong entirely to the most adaptable.
Because if you aren't actively updating your skills, your value in the market is actively depreciating.
Exactly. Growth is described in the text as a lifelong duty. It states plainly that the single greatest investment you can make isn't in real estate, and it isn't in index funds. It is in yourself.
Because you are the asset.
Right. Because your adaptability, your specific knowledge, your ability to synthesize information, those are the only assets that are entirely crash-proof. No market correction can wipe out your ability to communicate effectively or solve complex problems.
But let's look at the reality of human behavior here. What happens when someone refuses to adapt? When they treat that supercomputer purely as an arcade machine, they don't invest in their skills, and they inevitably fall behind in a shifting economy.
Well, it's not pretty.
Right. The text notes that they rarely engage in self-reflection. Instead, they turn to the ultimate psychological defense mechanism, blame.
Yeah. Blame functions as the ego's shock absorber. It is highly effective at protecting you from the painful, crushing realization that your own daily choices led directly to your current financial stagnation.
The dialogue tackles this head-on, exploring the absolute uselessness of blame versus the reality of how the world actually rewards people.
What's refreshing about this text is that it completely avoids toxic positivity. It doesn't pretend the world is some utopian meritocracy. It openly acknowledges that life is not equally fair.
Which is important to state.
Very important. External factors, a sluggish economy, terrible government policies, systemic societal barriers, those are validated as real and impactful. But it draws a merciless line. Blaming those factors, regardless of how real they are, generates absolutely zero forward momentum.
It uses an analogy that is just impossible to forget. Imagine two people standing outside in a torrential, freezing downpour. One person stands in the mud, complaining bitterly about the weather, yelling at the clouds, and analyzing why the storm is unfair.
Right.
The other person ignores the inherent unfairness of the rain and immediately starts gathering wood to build a shelter. The text asks a simple question. Who gets dry first? Obviously, the one who takes action. But I want to push back on this because it's really easy for us to sit here in a comfortable room and say, just stop complaining and build a shelter. When the system actually is broken, when the rain is acidic and relentless, isn't the act of building a shelter exhausting? Isn't it entirely valid for people to be furious at the storm?
If we connect this to the bigger picture the text is painting, it isn't telling you to suppress your anger. It isn't denying that the storm is brutal. What it is asserting is a fundamental law of human agency. Responsibility is power, and excuses are weakness.
That's a strong statement.
It is. The moment you externalize your locus of control, the moment you decide, I am financially stuck because of the government or my boss or the economy, you inadvertently surrender all your power to those exact entities. You reduce yourself to a passenger in your own life.
So you're basically waiting for someone else to turn off the rain rather than taking control of your own dryness.
Exactly. Taking relentless responsibility for the variables you can control, your skills, your spending, your adaptability, is the only mechanism for building leverage. And that pivots into the text's explanation of the cold mechanics of capitalism. The market does not care about your exhaustion, your effort, or how valid your excuses are. The market only rewards value.
It spells out exactly why compensation differs. Doctors, engineers, successful entrepreneurs, skilled communicators, they don't command high income simply because they sweat more than the day laborer we mentioned earlier.
No, not at all.
They are compensated because they solve complex, urgent, and highly specific problems.
Money follows value. It is literally just an exchange mechanism for problem solving. The text argues that if you want to change your financial reality, asking, how much money do I want to make, is the wrong question entirely.
Right.
The only question that drives actual wealth creation is, what meaningful problem can I solve?
And the scale of the problem dictates the scale of the compensation.
Always. The more scarce and useful your skills become to society, the more capital flows your way as a natural byproduct. This circles all the way back to why investing in your own education is the ultimate wealth strategy. By learning, you're literally increasing your capacity to solve higher stakes problems.
So what does this all mean? When we pull these ancient philosophical threads together and apply them to that feeling of being stuck on the modern treadmill, the deep dive reveals a truth that is simultaneously uncomfortable and deeply empowering.
Yeah, it really does.
Financial stagnation is almost never the result of one massive, catastrophic mistake. It is the invisible, silent accumulation of hundreds of tiny, seemingly harmless decisions repeated every single day.
It is the compounding math of your unexamined habits.
Yeah. It's the habit of allowing expenses to rise to meet your income. It's choosing the immediate dopamine of a 300 rupee comfort over the delayed freedom of an investment. It's choosing the frictionless consumption of endless scrolling over the cognitive friction of learning a new skill. And ultimately, it's choosing the warm, comfortable blanket of blaming the system over the cold, difficult action of building your own shelter.
All said. The dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna closes with a quote that perfectly encapsulates this philosophy of radical personal agency. Krishna says, "Do not ask whether the future will be better. Ask whether you are becoming better for the future."
Wow. That is incredibly profound. It shifts the entire burden of success off the shoulders of the universe or the economy and places it squarely on your own adaptability.
It demands that you become an active participant in your own rescue. But there's one final lingering question this text provokes, especially when we sit with the premise that money strictly follows the value you provide to others.
The premise that you have to solve problems to get paid?
Right. The text clearly states that wealth is generated, not by desiring money, but by looking outward and asking, what problem can I solve? So consider this. Does the relentless, self-centered pursuit of wanting to get rich, the obsession with our own empty bathtubs and our own bank accounts, actually blind you to the very problems you need to solve for other people in order to build that wealth in the first place?
That is a fascinating flip. I mean, if you are entirely consumed with your own lack of money, you aren't looking at the world closely enough to see what it actually needs from you. You're staring at the treadmill instead of the horizon.
Exactly. If you want to get off that exhausting hustle culture treadmill we talked about at the start, where you're waking up in the dark, grinding away, but going nowhere, well, maybe the answer isn't to just run faster. Maybe the answer is to step off, look around at the storm, and ask, who else needs a shelter built?